and welcome to the Square. Tonight's discussion is going to focus on Umushyikirano, also known as the National Dialogue annual event that takes place every year in December. It's set to take place next week from 13th to 14th December, and our discussion on the Square this evening is going to focus on the rationale of this very important event for the country, as well as its previous impact in the country and looking forward on future Umushyikiranos, so to speak. We are joined here, very honored to have with us here, the Director of Cabinet from the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Evariste. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you. My name is Dana Mpisi. I am part of the Square. As always, I'm joined by the Square's permanent resident panelists. With me on my left is S1E39. Welcome to the Square.
Thank you for having me, Dee.
Good. As always, the Square is also joined by Charles Harbour and Berna Namata.
Thank you.
Dana, how are you?
Good.
Good.
So, Mr. Evariste, before we go into the conversation, we usually have a weekly recap of the week.
Okay, that's good.
Recap, and I know there's some interesting things that have been happening, and we'll make it very brief. I'll start with you, Efrain.
I would have loved to start with Charlie, but I think that
we always start with Charlie. We're changing things there on this stage.
But yes, so I think for me, at least the news of the week was the Global Citizen Festival that happened in South Africa. His Excellency had a chance to attend, and he gave a resounding speech around youth and the involvement of youth. But I think for me, the highlight was when the South African billionaire, Patrice Motsepe, said he was going to donate 3.5 billion rand, which is equivalent to $350 million, to land reform. And it's particularly interesting because land reform is in relation to what's been happening around the expropriation of land without compensation. So it was for me, it was an interesting highlight.
Charles?
I was about to talk about the unprecedented mileage petition of the penal code until somebody in the southern province decided to artificially alleviate poor people to a category of Budehe they do not belong to, compelled them to hold the Rwandan flag and swear to become husband and wife while wearing slippers. And these people even confessed that they can even hardly afford a meal. It was extremely embarrassing. I think it's something that needs to be looked into. Yes.
On that,
yes.
That comment, because there's a lot of questions I have. Brandon, midweek recap?
I was at the African Economic Conference this week by the ADB, UNDP, UNECA, and what was highlighted is that Africa has too many agreements, but there's no implementation. And of course, this was within the context of the CFTA. Now, there's a lot of optimism around the CFTA because when you review the past agreements, usually when there's the signing, not so much happens after. But for the first time, we're seeing that there's a lot of conversation going on and it has to be encouraged. But the other thing that was mentioned was the fact that currently most of the trade disputes on the continent are solved by politicians. Yet, ideally, we should have trade dispute mechanisms, accompanying these protocols. Why they are not working, why they are not functional, we don't know. So again, it reminds me of the conversation we had with Honorable Sesber about the role of politics. So if the politics can be sorted, I think we'll have even the CFTA tomorrow.
That's true. So let's get into the reason why we're here this evening, which is Umushyikirano. Specifically, we're doing this because it's coming up next week.
Yes, sure.
From 13th to 14th December. So my question to you, to start with, and of course the rest of the panel will chip in, is to do with just giving us a brief history and rationale of it. This is an event that started it's in its 16th edition. The first Umushyikirano was in 2003. At that time, it was attended by around 800 people from government sector, public sector, Rwandans in the diaspora. Fast forward to this year and even last year, and we have almost triple the numbers. But it's become a culturally owned, homegrown event. And my question to you is just to briefly share with us the rationale of this annual event, as well as a brief history.
Okay. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for inviting me to this show. Thank you, RBA, for inviting us to engage with the viewers, the panelists here, on the upcoming the National Umushyikirano Council. So actually, before we discuss the rationale, we need to first state it, and actually it's like for information to say it's a constitutional requirement. It's actually, according to Article 140 of Rwanda Constitution of 2003, revised in 2015, every year we always prepare and organize a National Umushyikirano Council. This National Umushyikirano Council is just a forum. It's a forum where Rwandans come together to discuss issues of the state of the nation and other issues of national unity. So it's very clear in the Constitution. And what we have done as government is to implement the constitutional requirement. Since 2003, we have always organized this National Umushyikirano Council. So on the rationale of this Umushyikirano Council and this history, maybe on the importance to our national development agenda. One, National Umushyikirano Council, as you might be aware, maybe you have participated in one or the other, brings together the citizens, the government, and actually the three arms of government together to discuss issues of national importance. So it's in one way or the other, it's like we get feedback from the citizens on exactly what we are doing. So it's like a forum of accountability at the same time. So one, citizen involvement in the national development agenda. Number two, it's also a forum where actually citizens make government officials account on what they have been doing for the previous 1 year. So that's why we always organize it every year around December. I also want to highlight that since 2003, we have been trying, we always organize it in December. The reason being, our national planning calendar also starts in December. So when we have this feedback, we have issues raised by the citizens. So they immediately input into our national development planning process. So by the time we reach in April, in May, and June, we have already integrated what the citizens think should be part of the national budget. So that is the importance and the rationale of the National Umushyikirano Council. Thank you so much.
If I can just ask something also briefly, I would like to think that also the reason it began, you started with the constitution and everything, but I wanted to understand from a Rwandan mindset, the leaders who came together and said, because it's rare that this happens in countries across the continent.
Exactly.
How did it come about that the leaders, that we or engaging with different parts of society say, let's have a dialogue led by the head of state, whereby Rwandans from all walks of life come together? I wanted you to share a bit more from that particular angle.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, it's more, because I will not discuss here the history of the country, but it's rare in different countries where this same kind of platform is organized. In all our countries we have here in Africa, you'll find maybe it's Rwanda, if I'm not mistaken, but it's like looking at where we came from. So the government, the leaders of this country, led by His Excellency the President, said we need to involve citizens in the planning and owning the development process of this country. So that's the first point. It's like, why should we as government plan and say we are going to do this? Why can't we actually involve the citizens, involve everyone, the business community, involve civil society, faith-based organizations? Actually, I wanted even to highlight on participants later on if you allow. But it is like the government wanted to involve each and everyone to participate in the development process of this country. So since 2003, it has been something that has been pushing to ensure that whatever we do in actually organizing this National Umushyikirano Council, we bring on board each and everyone to ensure that actually there is high-level participation from citizens and from other different stakeholders.
I think this is extremely interesting because when you talk about it having happened since 2003 and the evolution is actually interesting. One of the things that extremely mesmerizes me is the technology.
Exactly.
When you look at the last edition and with the growing of numbers and you have different sites. When it first began, I think it used to happen only at Parliament, and it grew, and you have a site at Petistad, and then in Northern Province, and it's really amazing that you have a lot of this participation and technology. But my biggest issue really is around how you evaluate. And this is what does not come back to us as the viewers. And I'm glad that you come from the Prime Minister's office. And one of the things that, that beats me whenever I read minutes of the cabinet meetings, Ephraim and Bana are very quick to jump into the section of appointments. But they never see that there are other sections of the cabinet meetings that say we have gotten money from so and so, we have reviewed this law, and you know. But there is one thing that always comes in at the first item on the minutes is the cabinet passed the minutes of the previous meeting after making amendments.
Yes.
We never get to know what those amendments are. Similarly, with the national dialogue, do you have a mechanism of letting the populace know that this is what you check yourselves against? Because for us who are ordinary wananchi, we don't see that you check yourselves against anything.
So basically,
Yes,
if you have a yardstick where you
Yes.
measure yourselves, and I think we're going to get into that later on in the conversation,
Exactly.
a yardstick against which you measure yourselves and the implementation of resolutions or agreements made in
I'd
Umushyikirano.
want to add to that. You know, we always have these resolutions, but when you read the resolutions, they seem almost open-ended. And I think for me, just to add on to his question, and I think also it's linked to what we talk about on the square around institutional coordination. To what extent do these resolutions, to what extent are these resolutions actually implemented in detail so that at least all the stakeholders, and you talked about participants, all the stakeholders are involved in that process of ensuring that those resolutions are come to fruition?
Okay. Thank you so much. These are good questions. You can see they are a bit almost rated.
similar,
Yes.
So what I'm going to answer them. One, actually what I didn't say is, it is again very clear in the Constitution that at the end of the National Umushyikirano Council, there are a number of recommendations that are actually communicated to the public and the media.
True.
To know what has been discussed and what they have agreed on for implementation. Immediately after, the Office of the Prime Minister, which I work for, coordinated the process of elaborating detailed plans from those recommendations. So when we have detailed action plans, we share with stakeholders for implementation. Now, actually, even the process, I'm not going into the detail, is even these stakeholders have a very big role to play when we are elaborating this plan. It's not, we don't dictate on what they are supposed to do. We say these are actions from the resolution, from the National Umushyikirano Council. Now, please, let's come together. That's the private sector, development partners in one or the other. Then we have the government institutions, these are ministries and other delivery agencies. Now we come together to elaborate the detailed action plan. Then implementation starts. I think I've clearly stated how it feeds into the national planning process from December onwards. Now, when the implementation starts, every quarter, every institution submits a quarterly report to the government, to the Office of the Prime Minister, to review the status of implementation. So every quarter we receive these reports. Now, at the end of the year, that is around December again, we are going back to the National Umushyikirano Council, which the Prime Minister, in a few days from now, the Prime Minister will now present a report of the status of implementation of the previous actions. Now, and we always have a time where the citizen now try to query and say, hey, we agreed on this, but it was not done very well. So it's like we allow citizens again to question what we have reported to them. So that is the process on how we do implementation and the feedback we give to the community.
So you wait for 12 years?
12
No,
months.
12 months, sorry. You wait for 12 months, sorry, Evariste, to tell the populace what you should have done 12 months ago. You know, I'm trying to think about an issue that may be protracted over an entire 12 months period. It may be burning in December 2018, and maybe by December 2019 it's ablaze. So I'm trying to think, my specific question, Evariste, as the recap, is what is the mechanism that the populace again knows of, knowing that there is follow-up of a burning issue that should have been
also
addressed
just
along the
quickly
way.
rephrase Chelsea's question to make it simpler, because I feel like you're saying it as well as you're thinking it out, so to speak.
Yes.
But if in 2012 you're going to release the findings for the last year compared to the resolutions that were released in 2017, right? Sorry, in December 2018, you're going to tell us about the year-long resolutions and implementation in 2018. Is there a way you actually inform the population, maybe on a quarterly basis?
Okay, thank you
Instead
so
of
much.
waiting to hear about this next week.
Actually, what we need to understand here is when we talk of Umushyikirano, what is discussed is, yes, there are some new ideas, but you'll find it's like checks and balances on the ongoing policies and plans. You understand? That we actually design and develop when the population is involved. So, yes, if we have a number of platforms in local government, we have Umuganda, most of these things when we discuss like Mituel, actually, this is something that will come back during Umuganda. So there are a number of mechanisms and platforms where we communicate to the citizens.
On a regular basis.
On regular
not
basis.
Waiting until the end
but
of
at
the
the
year.
same time, I wanted to say, these are not entirely as if they are new ideas. These are policies already ongoing, and now we are getting feedback on how to do them better and how to implement them very well. So it's an ongoing process.
Brenna, did you have something you wanted to add to?
Yes, I just wanted to understand the reports that you receive. This is an issue again that has been raised before, especially during the Imihigo assessments, you know, where you have officials come up with rosy, they paint a rosy picture of what's happening, and then later only to discover that. So as you receive these reports, do you have a committee that actually goes back and cross-checks?
Investigate.
Or are you just on the receiving end of the reports?
For the final data.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, we have due to have invested a lot in that. Even where I work at the Office of the Prime Minister, we have a unit called Government Action and Coordination Unit. We have another in the Office of the President called SPU, Strategy and Policy Unit. We have another big department, the Ministry of Finance, called the National Development Planning Unit. So all these actual departments work together to ensure that what we agree on during Umushyikirano are fully implemented. So wherever we just send these actions to different institutions to implement, we do constant and continuous follow-up. We send people on field. When you go on field, we meet a number of stakeholders trying to cross-check whether what was agreed on is exactly what is being implemented. And when they bring, actually it's the entire what we call the monitoring and evaluation. We have a monitoring and evaluation system. So it involves the entire process of cross-checking to ensure that what was decided at the National Umushyikirano Council is fully implemented by all relevant institutions. So we have those committees in different institutions. Even when we go to the Ministry of Local Government, we have the inspection unit. It's a big department. They always do that.
My advice to you is to avoid the word fully. It might bring you into a lot of trouble.
Actually,
Trying to say that we are not fully doing it?
Yes, of
Yes,
course.
there's room for improvement.
He wanted to add something.
I wanted to actually ask, you mentioned it as, these discussions are on, majority of them are on conversations that have been ongoing.
Yes.
And again, this is a dialogue of the populace with government. And I think for me, the question always is, what are the repercussions for non-performance? And how can the populace, or at least the people who are bringing up these issues on an ongoing basis, actually hold government accountable and ensure that if somebody does not deliver on, I know one of the resolutions was around educating parents on nutrition. And let's say that doesn't happen. How do we ensure that the people who are responsible for implementing the final strategy are held accountable, and we can act, and there are repercussions for non-performance where it's taken seriously? And I say this because you mentioned ongoing issues, and I agree, some of these issues cannot be solved in 1 year or 2 years, but the question is, are we actually seeing progress, and are people being held accountable for that?
Okay, thank you so much.
And perhaps just to add to that, when you present it that, you have a team that goes on the ground and does this evaluation, yes, where is the role of the citizen in this process?
Yeah.
Because again, it's more like it's a top...
It's government regulating government.
Yes.
But if you can just
Where
start
are the feedback mechanisms for the citizens?
From the citizens.
with, but
direct-
let's just start with accountability as well.
For accountability, actually, this one is something I think we are aware of that. Accountability is very, very key here in Rwanda. And we have totally emphasized this as government. So leaders who cannot perform, the repercussions are very well known.
Very heavy.
Very heavy. So this one is very clear. So whatever we agree to implement every year, we have what we call, actually, you have heard of, I think you are aware of this evaluation of Mihigo, where even they give scores. So because, as I said, whatever comes out of this National Umushyikirano Council and other platforms feed into the national planning process. So at the end of the year, should you fail to account for what you are supposed to do, then there are repercussions. There is an end. So it's not open that you just deliver. If you are supposed to do A, B, C, then you do just A, and then that's the end. No, there is a clear follow-up by the government. It has been emphasized by His Excellency the President in different meetings, and even in this National Umushyikirano Council every year. So it's very clear, and it has been boldly stated.
If you can now tell, yes, Brenna's question
Now,
on citizen
on your question.
participation.
Citizen participation. Actually, when we go, it's not a one-way, it's a mix. Some countries, of course, have this top-down approach in whatever they do, but for us, it's a mix. So the government does everything in collaboration with the citizens. And we are going to discuss going forward some of the initiatives we have been implementing, and you find the role of citizens has been very great. You'll find that when we are talking about cooperative movements, investments, we have been emphasizing that these ones must be implemented in collaboration with the citizens, in collaboration with the business community, in collaboration with the civil society. Even last year, one of the resolutions was we need to involve other stakeholders in the implementation of different actions in education, actions in health, among others. So it's two-way. It's not just a top-down approach, it's a mix of the two approaches. Thank you.
I think,
yeah,
I'd be very keen to have some precision from the Director of Cabinet. To say, if you are to scale down, say, from 1 to 5, and say, what are the top 5 resolutions from the last Umushyikirano that you wish could have been
Implemented better.
Yeah, or implemented better.
That I wish could have been implemented better.
Yes, or implemented, or not implemented at all.
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, today, what I want to say is we have implemented most of all the actions up to above 80%. So we have implemented them very well. And the report next week on the 13th will be presented by the Right Honourable Prime Minister on the status of implementation of the actions from the last year's Umushyikirano Council. So we have done very well, above 80%. So I'm already happy that we have implemented all of them almost. About 80%.
When you have some time, please answer my question.
Yes.
What I was precisely asking, what is the 20%?
Okay. Maybe
Yes.
you rephrase your question and say the remaining
Yes,
maybe 20%.
the
that
20%, because I didn't know the percentage before
Exactly.
we had this conversation.
Yes.
So what are some of the things, that 20% that you wish could have been done or done better? Because you may be aware, and I'm pleased just before we started the show that you said you watch The Square fairly often, and you like listening to some of our comments, and we always ring a bell around institutional coordination. It also emanates from the fact that in the last leadership retreat, His Excellency the President really rubbed in that message, saying why institutions and leaders do not talk to one another. So as the Director of Cabinet in the Office of the Prime Minister, what are some of those, say, 2 out of 5 that you think could have been done better?
Actually, I want again to repeat, we have done well of around above 80%. There are few issues we are still having. You'll find maybe if there are issues most of the action is still pending. You'll find they're about like policies. There is one we are going to discuss about the school calendar. You know, they were supposed to discuss about changing the school calendar.
Yes.
You cannot do the school calendar. You cannot just implement it in just 1 year.
Yes.
You need to have like 2 years. These are some of the things we are working on. So there are some of the things I wish would have implemented, but because of their nature, you might not implement them in just 1 year. They might go up to even 2 years, because you cannot just change the calendar mid-year. You need to plan and say, I will do it maybe in 2 years or 3 years.
That's understandable.
Yes.
So, and while we're on these resolutions, 8 of them were passed last year, the 2017 Umushyikirano, and I think this is what the Prime Minister is going to share with us next week, as you said. But I just want to touch on one key thing, because we don't have time to go through all 8 resolutions. Just one key thing that the Prime Minister mentioned last year, and I'll read it out also for the sake of our audiences. This was in the 15th edition last year, and the Prime Minister stated that government will in the next 7 years accelerate the development of secondary cities across the country to ensure 35% of Rwandans are resident in cities by 2024, from the current 17.5%. I mean, of course, it's just been one year since he said that. Like you're telling us some things can't be implemented in just 12 months. But what is the reality on making this, sorry, what's the progress on making Prime Minister's statement a reality? What's happening in terms of secondary cities becoming a reality by 2024?
Okay, thank you so much. If you would allow, I would correct that there were 9 resolutions.
Yes.
Recommendation,
Okay.
not 8. That's one. And regarding the question on actually growing from around 17.5 residents in cities to around 35, so a lot has been done. We have achieved a lot, and I will state one by one. One, we have actually in most of these secondary cities, that is Rusizi, Rubavu, Huye, we have Musanze, Nyagatare, Muhanga. A lot has been done. There is what we call, there is an urban infrastructure development project that has been implemented very well, and a way to actually start implementing. Phase 1 has been implemented fully. You have seen roads in most of these secondary cities, street lights, a lot has been done. Next phase will start very soon next year. So we hope that everything will go on as it was for the first phase. Number 2, you have seen a lot being done, specifically in shaping some of the secondary cities, like Huye, for example.
Yes.
You have seen the entire government going there to say, no, we need to change the shape of Huye. You have seen the Prime Minister himself going to Huye with a number of cabinet ministers to say we need to revamp Huye as one of the greatest secondary cities. So, following that, the visit of the Prime Minister, you have seen the Minister of Infrastructure himself, who is also a minister responsible for Huye, convening meetings with the business community in Huye that we need to do something together, not only as government, but also together with you as business community and the citizens. A lot has been done. A lot of number of roads are being constructed. The streets, the houses, cleaning, issues of sanitation, water, a lot is being, actually a lot is being done in Huye. Recently, you saw even then a decision was taken that most of the schools should go back to these secondary cities.
Exactly.
You have seen the UR campus,
Yeah.
for example. In Huye, we are sending more than 10,000 students. This year, they already is allocated to Huye. More than 3,000 students to Nyagatare district. So this is what the government is doing together with the business community and the citizens to revamp and develop these secondary cities. Another thing actually in place now is we have what we call the national green urban development plan. Now, it's a roadmap that is being implemented. Now, everything that is being done in those secondary cities must actually comply with this roadmap. So, I would say, and comfortably state here, that a lot has been done. There is good progress.
If I may, I just
very
want to
quickly
supplement. I think it's not quite often that, especially from me, it happens. I want to give credit where it's due.
Okay.
In as far as the secondary growth of the secondary cities is concerned, it's extremely impressive.
Yes.
I think the speed is a little bit beyond the expectations.
Exactly.
Rusizi is extremely impressive. I didn't imagine Nyagatare would wake up at the speed at which it's waking up. just 3,000 students, as in Nyagatare 2 weeks ago, are already beginning to make a very big difference for the business community. Huye is extremely impressive. I think, Derek Cab, you guys are on the right path.
If I can just ask you something, and I want to echo, before we go for the break quickly, echo more or less what Brenna asked. In this, this particular question on secondary cities, what is the level of interaction with citizens?
Okay, thank you so much. In whatever we do, as I said,
especially the private sector.
The private sector.
Yes.
You can't, actually where I'm saying, if I go back to the question, increasing the number from 17% residing in cities to 35%. It's not the government pushing these people to go and stay in secondary cities or in urban centers. They are pull factors that might be worked on, that must be dealt with. Yes. And the government cannot do it alone. Yes. They must involve the private sector. We need to build industries. This is an example. I can even give you an example on the partnership between the private sector and the government. You go to Musanze, it's one of the secondary cities. Yes. We have an industrial park there, and so far, there is a cement factory under construction. One of the biggest cement factories around is under construction in Musanze district. So we are not doing it as government, but we are doing it in partnership with the private sector. So even when we go to Nyagatare, we are looking at initiatives where they are private sector led. When you go to Rusizi, when you go to Huye, as I said, the Minister of Infrastructure was engaging the community that we need to do A, B, C, D together. So it's not the government. The government might provide infrastructures and other utilities, but it's the private sector to take a lead.
Yes. Brenna, very quickly before we go for the break.
I just wanted to give feedback with regards to planning. I mean, there's no doubt it's amazing work that is happening with secondary cities. But if you engage some of the citizens, for instance, they are a bit, they have a negative view of what's happening. And Huye is one of those places. For the students who are already in Kigali, working and doing these things, and then they have to, the next day they are told you have to move, like within 2 weeks or so. This has happened. So in terms of planning, is there a way that you can communicate long-term plans so that whoever is planning at least has a sense of how, the bigger picture is likely to affect them? Because quite often you have these wonderful strategies developed by technicians, and finally they are unveiled, and then people don't know what to do with them or where to begin or how they will affect them. So how do you improve the process of consultation in a manner that you have a wider appreciation of the long-term strategic views, that are supposed to drive whatever programs that you have?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I pray that I wish you had rephrased the question. But when you say, just today you do this, tomorrow students are in Huye, it's not the case. It was actually, the plan was there. Since last year, they have been planning, communicating to students, student organizations and forums. So it was not just a one-day decision.
Did you have pushback or not? With regards, at least students, did you have a bit of pushback?
Pushback on?
Some students,
some resistance?
Yes, some resistance.
Yes.
And you had some lecturers even say, we are not moving.
We have not had that.
I think we'll deal with that when we come back from the break.
We have not had that. But if it's there, it's a good feedback. But what I wanted to say is the government does not immediately say, today we are doing this, tomorrow go
It's not an overnight
It's not an overnight decision.
It's not overnight.
I will disagree.
Yeah. What I'm saying, Brenna, we are going for the break. Brenna, we'll be back after the break. But there's some more questions that we need to address in this short period. We'll be back after the break. We're here discussing Umushyikirano. It's going to happen next week, 13th to 14th December. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the Square. Tonight's discussion is, the focus of tonight's discussion is Umushyikirano, National Council Dialogue. This is taking place next week from 13th to 14th December. And here with us we have the Director of Cabinet from the Office of the Prime Minister. Thank you once again for joining us. We've been talking before the break with regards to civic participation in terms of these resolutions that are passed on, as well as the implementation and a brief history of Umushyikirano. My next question to you, it's our final question before we go to social media and we close, is very broad-based. I want you to let us know, I'm sure the Prime Minister is going to officiate next week's Umushyikirano, so you can give us details on what will be released. But are there some novel, some sort of fresh ideas that we can expect to be included in Umushyikirano, not only of this year, but also moving forward, that is somewhat different to previous sort of agenda or the usual narrative?
Okay, thank you so much. Also, allow me to correct that the Prime Minister will not preside over Umushyikirano, it will be His Excellency the President.
No, I meant to read on the report.
Okay,
I meant the report.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So, as we have done every year, and as I said at the beginning, it's like a forum where everyone has come together to discuss issues of national importance.
Yes.
So as government, every year we're expecting new ideas, fresh minds, fresh ideas, innovations on how to do better. So we shall be happy as government to sit and listen from the public on the new ideas they are bringing on board, the diaspora. The good thing with this year, we have a big number. It will be, we are used to holding it and hosting it at the parliamentary buildings. It will be at the KCC, and it will attract
Where KCC is Kigali Convention Center?
Yes, exactly. Okay. And we expect around 2,000 participants from mainly the government, that's the cabinet, senior government officials. We have the parliament, the judiciary, the civil society organizations, representatives. We have faith-based organizations, the members from the diplomatic community, and the representatives and leaders from the youth organizations. I also want to state that every year, since 2012, when the President, His Excellency the President, launched what we call the Youth Connect Convention, we have always actually teamed the two. It's starting, the Youth Connect Convention is starting on 12th of December, and on 13th December, they are going to fall and actually participate in the National Umushyikirano Council. So it's like on 12th December, we have the Youth Connect Convention, then that is organized, actually this is going to be held at the Inare Conference Arena, and on 13th December, they will directly continue participating in our National Umushyikirano Council up to 14th of December. So you can see it's around actually 1,500 youth or more, and when you bring these together, you can see there are more than 3,000. So that's something new for this year. So we expect to have, as I said again, new ideas from our citizens, from the people, and from these other stakeholders I've mentioned. Yes.
Brenna?
Is there a way that, because looking at how Umushyikirano is done, quite often you have to stand up and ask a question. Now, not everyone is that confident, to sort of stand up and face up and say, this is what I think. Is there a way that you can create maybe surveys ahead of Umushyikirano to say, what would you like to be discussed? What are the issues? Give us an opinion. So that by the time you come to Umushyikirano, you have these independent reports directly, because now we have several channels. Even if you were to run a Twitter poll, for instance, on what do you think the topical issues should be during Umushyikirano, you immediately get feedback.
Yes.
So is there a way that can be probably considered next time, so that as much as we have the overall government report, but we also have independent reports directly from citizens, because we have the channels with, with
I'm pessimistic about what you're saying, and I'll give you my particular
But can you let
why.
him first answer his question?
Supplementary.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
as long as it's...
I'm not sure the Director of Cabinet will be very happy with my response, because in the last editions we've had Twitter feeds. Now, and they're live Twitter feeds. So whoever is moderating will get feedback from different forums, and it's up to somebody somewhere to sieve what will be read and portrayed out there. Now, the point is, they may as well do it, but the choice of what they publish or tell us or don't tell us or absorb will be entirely theirs.
Well,
but
that's
Brenda,
what we
right.
Brenda estimates.
Yes.
Can you please
If you
allow us
me,
to,
I think I need
to chip in?
allow me to disagree on that.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of the show.
Yes. So we have been working on the concepts and the topics to be discussed. We want to engage the media, we want more, we want even citizen participation. We want actually to have ideas actually before the Umushyikirano. So I think I want to disagree that there are some people who would be somewhere saying, no, this one should not be projected, or this one should not be part of the discussion.
There's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
No, it's
But
wrong
please-
because
Yes.
actually there is a team that actually brings up everything together, because we receive more than 100 kind of correspondences, 100,000, and the days are around 8-9 hours.
Yes.
When we look at it, so you might not project each and everything 100%.
Exactly my point, yes.
But the team must now use actually like what is people are now already discussing, Umushyikirano, different fora and everywhere. So the ideas that actually we get from different platforms, we try to bring them as we build our concept, the topics for discussion, actually the participants, what they can discuss. So there is a way, there is always a way.
So while
Much as
we're-
we might not do each and everything directly.
But you still have engagement from the public.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So while
Already it has
we're on that
started by
topic, we also have engagement from our public on Twitter, and I would like to read just a few tweets. And the first tweet is from Romeo, and Romeo's tweet is based on Umushyikirano. Romeo says that the way some primary students go to school by foot back to back during summertime should be looked into. I think that's what he meant to say, and probably that time become their holidays. So what you'd like to see probably raised there, and if you can address it right here, is to do with, and you mentioned it, the school calendar.
Yes.
Is this something you're also concerned and looking into based on the institution you represent in responding to that particular tweet?
Yes. Thank you so much. Actually, we have already, it is being discussed, already have a draft. Now, consultation ongoing with different stakeholders, and we're working on it. As I said, it can't be done in just 2 months, 3 months. It's a school calendar. It needs time to change. You cannot just change in 1 day or 2 months or 9 months. So we expect that maximum by mid next year or by end of next year, it should fully be implemented. Yes.
Bernard, just very quickly, you had something you wanted to say before we...
Yes, just to emphasize that we are not saying that the feedback should come a day before or so. You can launch these reports a month or two before to allow you to, go through the data and actually get reasonable feedback. I think that would be useful. I'm not suggesting anything close to the event. No, I'm saying yes, a month before or 2 months before, so that at the event you have concrete evidence-based discussions.
Actually, that's a good input. Going forward.
Yes, going forward.
Yes.
Yes.
This is Umushyikirano for everyone.
Yes.
Everyone must participate. So going forward, we need to bring some of these ideas on board. I think it's
I would probably, thank you so much, Bana, for bringing that up. I would build up onto that and say, each time you have the resolutions of the Umushyikirano, it would be very important for us to understand that, or maybe you give yourself quarterly timelines and say, this one will be implemented by Q1 or Q2 or Q3 or Q4. As Bana is saying, the periodic appreciation of whatever is happening is then done. By the time we know we're in Q4, whatever was supposed to be done in Q3 has been done by the 80% and so on and so forth, as opposed to waiting for 12 months. I think that would be...
Right. We take note of this.
Yes.
Is there something you want to add, Efrain? You've been quiet on this corner.
Because I think for me, let me take a leaf from Charlie's page today, and say you have to give credit where credit is due.
Yes.
And I love the fact that they've connected the Youth Connect conference Youth Connect conference.
Convention.
Yes. And they have had it right before. I think more than we see this a lot, and Rwanda has always been the exception in relation to this, but you see this across the world, where the issues that are going to be affecting the youth in the future are being discussed by their parents today, and it misses the whole point. So I love the fact that that happens. I think more than anything, I just want to know, to what extent does the convention affect what ends up being discussed at Umushyikirano?
The youth convention.
The youth convention. Why is it had before? You know, why is it so important that it's had before, a few days before, and then that leads into Umushyikirano?
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, the reason we have, it's a good question. The reason we have it before is actually for them to first discuss amongst themselves and agree on some issues they need to take up to Umushyikirano.
Okay.
Number two, the reason is there are other issues they need to discuss without this kind of Umushyikirano council.
Yeah.
So, whatever they discuss, they are organizing some trainings for the youth. They have some awards that will be given out. So there are some other activities that will be done on 12th. Okay. But going forward on 13th, immediately whatever is taken from the 12th convention, it feeds into the Umushyikirano.
So who represents the youth? Is it the youth councils, or is it representatives from that particular convention? Is it the Ministry of Youth? Is it appointed individuals from there that they select? How are we ensure that what the youth have discussed is going to be tabled at Umushyikirano?
Actually, if it's Umushyikirano, people will bring up ideas. It's an open kind of discussion and participation. Each and every youth participating might raise a hand and say, I need this to be heard and to be included.
So there is no structure in relation to it?
There is no structure to say that this one is going to bring up this, but at the end of it all, whatever they discuss, these are resolutions that will also be part of the resolutions that will be implemented by government.
So that's what I'm asking. What guarantee is there that happens?
It happens.
It happens.
Every year.
Yes. And like you said, there are checks and balances and institutional coordination involved.
I think with me, it's just a curiosity. I want to know what exactly.
He's right. Yeah. He's very right.
I think you should attend Umushyikirano and ask that question.
No.
I
will. But actually, as we have the Minister of Youth coordinating this, whatever they discuss today, there is it's like there are different recommendations on what they are going to do, then it is also implemented. But there are some issues, of course, that will come out clearly, and they feed into the resolution of Umushyikirano.
We've come to the end of our show. Thank you very much. I'd like us to give very brief closing remarks. Last week, there's some people who didn't give closing remarks.
It was me and Brenna.
It was you and Brenna. So Brenna, I'll start with you. Briefly, quick closing remarks.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes.
And I hope that it will be more inclusive, not the same faces being invited to the event, more diverse and, a bit of debate. I don't expect many apologies because most of the time some people come and when we say this is not working, they apologize, but that doesn't mean taxpayers' money is refunded, So we need more practical accountability.
Yeah.
There was a funny story from, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, where somebody went and talked about the financial prosperity as a private sector player. And I think they said they'd been in business for 5 years and they were just thanking the government. Unfortunately, the amount that they mentioned piqued the interest of Rwanda Revenue. So I just hope this year Rwanda Revenue will be a little bit more forgiving of the private sector as they talk about.
No, before you should pay your taxes.
Charles, very quickly.
One of the biggest things that I want to come out of this Umushyikirano is solving of the biggest problem that government has, which is institutional coordination. I hope they can be able to fix this.
Director of Cabinet.
Thank you so much. I want to also add and say we are having more sites this year. We have other remote sites. We have included Ngombo in Rusizi district. It's an island.
That's amazing. All the way out there.
Yes, exactly.
So there it is, inclusivity.
And other regions are going to be represented still, but we are adding in Ngombo in Rusizi.
That's
fantastic.
So looking forward to your participation.
Thank you so much.
I hope we can get invitations or access to.
Invitations are for every Rwandan. You can participate physically. You can even follow.
Okay.
Online?
I think I'm sure it will be live on Arabic.
It will.
Happy
But I
hour.
think they'll all physically definitely be there. So I'd like to thank you once more for honoring our invitation, a very interesting topic. Please keep the conversation going using our hashtag #TheSquareRW on Umushyikirano. It's starting next week, from 13th to 14th December at the Kigali Convention Center. I'd like to thank our partners, Bourbon Coffee, as well as Uzi Collection. We'll be here next week, same time. Have a good evening.